The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the Program Review Update webinar. We will be discussing, giving an overview of our program review process, and then we'll also be announcing some exciting news at the end. So before we get started, I just wanted to let all the staff participating in this webinar introduce themselves. I'm Whitney Thompson, the Director for Career and Technical Education for the Illinois Community College Board.
Ashley Becker, Senior Director of Academic Affairs, Illinois Community College Board.
This is Nathan Wilson, Senior Director of Research and Policy Studies here at the Community College Board.
And Mackenzie Montgomery, Director for Student Services here at the ICCB.
And I'm Heather Fox. I'm at the Office of Community College Research and Leadership.
All right, so before we jump in, I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available to you following whenever we post it, as well as the presentation. If you have questions, you can use the chat or question feature. We will not be answering questions live on this webinar, but we will be able to input those questions into an FAQ and get those out to you sometime next week. You can also feel free to reach out to us. You are in listen-only mode. So today we're going to give an overview of the statewide program review process. We're going to dive into the major program areas that we review and talk about expectations, submissions, and also talk about feedback. We'll also be covering some frequently asked questions to share with you. And then Heather Fox from OCCRL will talk about their program review scope of work that we have partnered and contracted with them. And then we will talk about, what's next, what's to come in the upcoming year, and then we will provide some closing comments. So it's about an hour-and-a-half long webinar, but don't be disappointed if we get done a little bit early. All right, so I think it's appropriate to preface this with why we do this work. So one, well, we are required to do so. The Illinois Community College Board is mandated by the Illinois Public Community College Act to coordinate a statewide program review system, which is the system that we're going to talk about today. We also have the authority to approve and disapprove programs, discontinue programs. However, we rarely ever use this authority. We want to give you the tools and resources necessary to make those decisions. Secondly, the purpose of the statewide program review process is to really support strategic campus level planning and decision making. It's really to foster a continuous quality improvement for your program, and then ensure that your programming meets the needs of your local economy, but also that these programs are cost effective and high quality. So as you know, last year we rolled out a revised version of the program review manual for fiscal year 2017 into 2021. Although the expectations remain the same, it was really a complete overhaul of the manual, the review templates, etc. And we decided to do this because we wanted to more closely align program review process with the program approval process, as well as recognition. We wanted to be able to better utilize this information collected to inform the field on trends and themes and best practices. We're not quite there yet, but we're looking to really use the information that we're provided to inform program actions for you all. And this was really in response to the variation in program submissions we were seeing. So, there were several submissions that were inadequate and others that were very robust. And so we wanted to kind of standardize this process for you and provide you with the tool that we thought would be useful to support your internal reviews. So I just want to say that none of this is new information. This is all detailed in your manual, but we will get into some preliminary feedback and expectations following kind of this general overview. So as we talked about the statewide program review process, It complements college-level planning and decision-making. We really encourage you to integrate this process into your quality improvement processes at your college. So whether that be development of the annual calendar, accreditation review, whenever you are putting together your institutional budgets. And we have provided you with guidelines, templates, and schedules that have been developed to assist you in reviewing the 4 major instructional program areas which are described to you. So career and technical education, academic disciplines, cross-disciplinary instruction, and then finally student and academic support services. And these are all similar to the past. So at a minimum, you are required to examine need, cost, and quality of individual instructional programs. And it's important that this isn't done solely in one office, that you're involving faculty, appropriate administrators, as well as other divisions and support staff. This is a data-driven decision-making process, that you're employing relevant information such as assessments, reviewing student-level data, as well as your own processes. And then assure that this process is well documented and the use of results are actually used to inform, as I said, campus planning initiatives, quality improvement efforts, and additionally, budget allocation decisions. We don't want this just to be a report that you submit to us, but something that you use internally to foster quality improvement. Second, report results and actions resulting from the reviews to your local boards, advisory committees, and other stakeholders. We've seen this as a best practice. A couple colleges have told us how once they go through the program review process, they do sort of a presentation for their advisory committees as well as other college staff, and then they also present their action steps and how they plan to move forward, and then that gives the advisory committees and other stakeholders a chance to provide feedback on those action steps. We would like to see these implemented strategies to address deficiencies discovered during the review process, and then adhere to the minimum review cycle of 5 years. Here is the schedule. This can be found at the back of the program review manual. We've already been through fiscal year 2017. You submitted those in September. Academic disciplines, student academic support services, and CTE remain largely unchanged. However, we have reorganized the cross-disciplinary instruction section, which Ashley will talk a little bit about. So here are just some basic submission details. So the submission of your program review portfolio is due September 1st of each year. Originally, it was August 1st, but we have pushed that back a bit. Exceptions, we are accepting any formally approved exceptions. Just make sure that that's documented, but moving forward, we would like everyone to be on the same 5-year program review schedule. Extensions, if you need an extension for your submission, please give us a month's notice. And then submissions can be sent to cte@iccb.state.il.us. All right, so now that we've covered some of the basic aspects of this process, we're going to go into the major sections of program review. So first is career and technical education. So I have a small description up there of what CT programs are. And really for the program review process moving forward, we're going to require you to take a deeper dive of your CTE program. So we're going to be asking questions that we previously haven't asked. So what are the prerequisites and course sequences? What is the occupational demand? What dual credit opportunities are you offering for this program? Are you conducting student and employer satisfaction surveys? What assessments are used? And then, of course, we take a closer look at some data components. So here's a snapshot of the template that is used. It should be familiar to you unless you received a waiver for last year. you'll be doing that this year. So we start out with some basic information, and so this is just, you know, program title, is it a degree or certificate program, total credit hours, and then we talk about and we ask for some other basic information. And then here on the right, you can see that we're asking about need, cost effectiveness, and quality, which are at the minimum for program review. And they're very specific questions, so we want very specific and concise responses. And then following those components, we go into more of a data analysis. And so we're asking for specific data. Now, it's not uncommon for colleges to submit data sets and this information in previous reviews, but now we're asking for it in a more uniform way and more explicitly. So as you can see, we want a 5-year longitudinal set of data. We have number of students enrolled, number of completers, and then you see that other metrics there. And this could be anything that you really look at. And so an example would be persistence or retention rate. And then below you can see that we're encouraging you to disaggregate data. You know, where are the gaps in the data? What is the college doing to overcome these identified gaps? And then lastly, you'll see the review results. And this was really at the beginning of the review cycle previously, but we feel that it makes more sense for it to be at the end, since it falls at the end of your actual cycle. So this should match the findings. It should be appropriate to what you're finding in your review. So for example, if you have 100 students enrolled in a program and only 5 are completing every year, you know, we wouldn't want you to say continued with minor improvements. You know, we would want to see some major modifications there and some major questions being asked. So in terms of CTE, here are our expectations when we're reviewing these submissions. So we want to see that you're integrating these components into your program review process to avoid duplicative efforts. So we designed this program review manual so that you can use it internally, and it's not just a report submission due at the end of the year. We want to be able to see you adopting and using these templates and guides. That you're thoroughly responding to needs, cost, and quality, that you're answering questions clearly and concisely, and not just, you know, going around the question. Answer it directly, and if you do not have the answer, just say that. Responses are specific to the program being reviewed, so we've seen kind of sort of a copy and paste method in the past, so we don't want generalized sample language used throughout. We want to see the responses to be specific to those programs being reviewed. We want to see disaggregation of data and examining the gaps. And again, like I already talked about, we want to see that the action steps are appropriate for the findings, and that the action steps reflect continuous quality improvement of the program, but that also you're looking at not only program components, but institutional processes that affect this programming. So now I am going to turn it over to Ashley Becker, who will cover the academic disciplines portion.
Thank you, Whitney. So the academic affairs disciplines portion was overhauled quite a bit. The main focus of this area really is to try to align with the Illinois Articulation Initiative, Gen Ed, core component areas. So we have now, we'll review courses and sequence courses in communications, mathematics, physical and life sciences, humanities and fine arts, and social and behavioral sciences. These reviews should focus on the quality of an individual course, as well as clusters or sequences of courses, as well as how successful the discipline area as a whole is in achieving its goals. If you look at the charts that we have added, we have the expectation that this must be done for each course in that particular discipline area. The reason why we ask this is because there are several different sections within those courses. And one of the things that we are starting to evaluate is the success of not only who is teaching those courses, but the overall comparison amongst them to find out if we can find any themes or trends when we talk about retention, enrollment, wraparound support services, things to that nature. So we remain with the similar expectations, but added course-specific data on those enrollment, retention, and completers. General education courses are typically were in the cross-disciplinary, but will now move back to an academic section only. So each year we will have a scheduled section of what would be considered the gen ed component. So for those who are submitting these areas, you'll do that for each course. You'll go through with the number of students enrolled, the credit hours produced, retention rates for both fall and spring, and then the success rates, which is a C or better at the end of the course, excluding withdrawals and audit students, and then an II status. So if you have an II code, I expect the code to be within that table. If you do not have an II code, because there is other ways of articulation, a Form 13 status must include the signature date as well as the 3 institutions that sign those forms to show that that is articulated. You will further dive into how the data supports the discipline or the course goals, and we want you to be very detailed here. We want to look at the disaggregated data, what was reviewed, why it was reviewed, and then where the gaps are in the demographic data and what your explanation is for those gaps. So the expectations, really from the academic affairs standpoint, we really want you to dive deep and analyze the data, including course level, demographic level, really to identify the trends and the equity gaps. With many of the initiatives that are going on across the state, the Academic Affairs Department will be diving very deep and looking closely at these things as we go forward, and we'll be working with the colleges to make necessary changes if needed. Based upon the analysis, the colleges are expected to provide the ICCB with an intended action step that detail the steps to be completed by the college to ensure the college is improving in any areas of deficiencies. Additionally, the college should provide a rational statement or summary of the review findings and a rationale for any future modifications. Also, you must identify any resources needed and who is responsible for ensuring these modifications are implemented and completed. The ICCB will be following up to ensure that the things that are stated in the action plan are being followed through with. So that brings us to the remedial and developmental education. For those of you who have been working in this area, you know that there's a lot of changes coming to the state. We know that developmental education does not work at its current state, and the Illinois Community College Board is currently leading the charge on redevelopment of developmental education through pathway programs and co-requisites. So the review in this, we decided to separate it into 2 different cycles. The FY 2018 will cover the remedial math, and then FY 2019 will cover remedial English language arts. The instrument is formatted very similar to the academic disciplines for the review instrument. We will probably dive deep into it, and don't be surprised if you have follow-up questions from us in terms of what you're doing to revamp your developmental education on your campus. The expectations are the same for the academic disciplines. We will continue to look at the data. We will expect that the colleges are evaluating that data and coming up with action steps to improve, and we will continue to follow up with the colleges to ensure that those things are occurring. So I will turn it over now to Mackenzie Montgomery, Director for Student Services.
Thank you, Ashley. As most of you know, this is my first round with program review as a Director for Student Services, so my hope is to make a few tweaks and changes along the way. Student academic support services are our non-instructional activities that support instruction and include your admissions, recruitment, registrar's office, learning and tutoring centers, career centers, job placement, your financial aid, disability services. The wraparound services that you provide to your students to make them successful, to get them in, through, and to graduate. So moving on, the schedule hasn't changed. There is still the self-assessment can be utilized. It's a tad outdated, so my goal in the future is to update it a little bit, to make it a little bit more relevant, but it's still a good tool to use when you're going through this process of evaluation. So moving forward, my expectations would be a brief overview of the program or the service under review and its goals tied to your student outcomes. Do you utilize the data to drive these goals? If so, how and what data are you tracking? This is information that is useful to me when I'm reviewing your data, when I'm reviewing your outcomes, and the success of your admissions department or whatever we're reviewing for that year. Any updates or modifications from the previous review. Provide a brief summary of any significant developments, whether they're positive or negative, since your previous review. How are they tied, like I said, to the student success outcomes? Where are there gaps? Please use your data to outline these. And especially in your strengths area, if you have a program that you think is a best practice or just a really good model that the data supports this, please list it. We're looking for best practices to get out into the system. I'm wanting to know, since I'm, like I said, still relatively new, what you're doing at your colleges, and this will give me kind of a overview or a snapshot. Details of findings from, Details of findings from the current review, Reflection on the degree to which the program is meeting the student needs. Are you meeting the student needs? If you're not, why and how are you using that data? And then based on your finding, I want your intended action steps. What's your next step in changing your weaknesses that you've identified? Looking, like I said, I keep referring back to the data, but looking at your data, your enrollment, your retention, your completion, your placement, your wraparound services that you provide. Look at those cohorts of students that you've identified in your data that need that little extra push. Please put those within your review. I think that's it. I'll turn this over to Dr. Ashley Becker for cross-disciplinary.
Thank you, Mackenzie. So a lot of what we already discussed is the removal of the general education and transfer function. It still remains, but we moved it into the academic section, so it doesn't fall under the cross-disciplinary section any longer. The developmental education and the remedial will remain there, but it will be broken into 2 review years, as well as the vocational skills and adult ed, which will remain the same for expectations, but might change with the 5-year review schedule when we add in some of the other things with developmental education. But as it stands right now, everything remains the same, minus the general education component, which now goes underneath academic affairs discipline. And you can see at the very bottom the new review cycle and when each section will be reviewed. So other program actions. Annually, colleges will report important program changes and improvements. I want to make sure I emphasize here that this also does not, do not report annually only. If you do make any modifications to any existing programs or courses, you have to report that to the Illinois Community College Board. If you do not, you're going to have fatal errors within your master file, and when you go to submit for reimbursement, they're going to kick out. So if you have any changes to programs or current courses that are significant, you have to submit that to Tricia Broughton with the Academic Affairs Department to ensure those changes are made. Outside of that, annually you are expected to report any important changes and improvements that did not result for the program review but are made as a result of campus planning or quality improvement. This includes but is not limited to addition of new programs and modifications or even the elimination of existing programs outside of the program areas, because many colleges do use this as an internal control piece to ensure that you're measuring and really having valid programs for your students that are successful. So if you do this every year, like many of you do with all disciplines, if you do make changes, let us know. If significant modifications were made or substantial recommendations were made prior to review cycle, make sure the ICCB staff is well aware of this and update is required. Use the program review supplement information form for that. If you're making changes to anything curriculum-based, whether it's a program or course level, you need to make sure you're following the program approval manual and make sure those submissions are going through for those who are in the curriculum process.
Some feedback for this year. Generally, the submissions this year are satisfactory. I think implementing this new template has been able for institutions to map out and be very detailed and intentional on their submissions. We did note some key areas for improvement. Keeping responses clear and concise. Like what Whitney had mentioned before, we have a tendency to add in some extra language to kind of work around the actual question being asked. If you don't know, state that in your statement. Ensure action steps are appropriate and sufficient based on your findings. Use of data templates seems disjointed. Lack of using cohort data. This goes back to what we explained earlier on the importance of using your data and breaking it down and breaking it out. And student services, like I mentioned, utilize data when reviewing student and academic support services. This should be the top priority that you use to know if you're being successful in those services. And a lot of questions that we get are, when can we expect some ICCB feedback? Spring 2008 is our goal date.
2018, so likely March, April. We were hoping to get it out a little earlier, but as you can imagine, there's only a handful of us reading some of these submissions from all 48 communities. So I'm going to go over some of the frequently asked questions that we get, just so that we can make sure that everyone understands the responses for each of these. So for the data analysis section, what years of data should be reviewed? So the most recent 5-year longitudinal data available to you. And we don't want to disrupt your own internal processes, so if you're using data from 2 years back and that historically fits with your internal program review process, that is fine. When a college has a program that houses a degree and a certificate, which are falling into different zip codes, which does happen, and as a result, different review years, can the college conduct a review of both during the year assigned to the degree zip code? So although the manual states that the ICCB will only honor previously approved and documented exceptions to the review schedule, in this instance, which may be rare, it is logical for the reviews of both the degree and the certificate in question to be conducted in the same fiscal year. When this occurs, though, please make this clear in your review submission. And I am going to read these verbatim because I don't want to misinterpret their meetings. And Nathan is here to add if there's anything that he needs to add. So for the CTE review template, does number of students enrolled refer to the number of students enrolled in the program or the number of students enrolled in the program courses? Colleges should report on the number of students enrolled in the program as a concentrator to avoid counting students who may be taking various program courses as electives. A program concentrator earns at least 12 credits within one fiscal year in a single program area sequence. The program area sequence should conclude with an award of a community college credential. Students can also be deemed a program concentrator if they complete a short-term credential within a fiscal year, which is less than 12 hours. 4, how is completer defined and where is this information located? Completers are successful student completions of approved programs. More than one completion can be reported for a student in a fiscal year due to stackable credentials within a program of study. Hence, a student could accumulate 3 completions if the student earns 1 certificate of a year or more and 2 certificates of less than a year. Information related to completions by community college can be found via ICCB's data book. Select the needed year and then section 3, and then the tables are provided to you there. So that is linked whenever you have access to the PowerPoint, and then we've also linked the program review FAQ here for easy access, and we will be adding to that with the questions that you posed today.
Some potential changes for future reviews. This is based on some college feedback. Program review listserv. So any new and improved changes can go out in the masses. Program review specific inbox for submissions. Resources, example, and guides, which we talked about earlier. The revision, like I said, of the student services self-assessment, which will be updated. A new method of compiling information and submissions, and not in Microsoft Word. Minor tweaks to the review tool, questioning, data sections, etc., stemming from external evaluation.
So know that we are taking in your concerns and suggestions, and that we are working to continually improve this process. We view it as a living document, so we want to make revisions and changes to it to make it useful and easy and user-friendly for you all. So we're looking, like Mackenzie said, into creating some of those resources, examples and guides for you. And then also we've been looking into a new way, not Microsoft Word, right? I know that's been one of the largest complaints is that we are still using Microsoft Word, but we've heard of some online programs, so maybe we can look into that in the future. So we are taking your concerns and suggestions to heart. So if you have program-specific questions, we've outlined who to contact for those. For CTE, vocational skills, and just larger submission questions, you can contact me. For academic disciplines, remedial education, you can contact Ashley. Adult education, including ESL, which falls in the cross-disciplinary review, you can contact Jennifer Foster. And then student and academic support services, you can contact Mackenzie. And then we'll update this slide with Nathan's contact information, but I know that all the IR staff work with him on a regular basis, so if you have data-specific questions, we'll be more than happy to answer those. So now I am going to turn it over to Heather Fox from OCCRL, who will be talking about their scope of work for program review as it pertains to these revisions.
Okay. Whitney, can you confirm that my screen is showing?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Okay. All right, everyone. I'm really excited actually to talk to you today about one of our newer projects that has been made possible by the Illinois Community College Board, looking at program review. And for simplicity, we're calling it Program Review Illinois. And I wanted to be able to explain and share what we're doing. And I'm also going to ask and hope that while we're not answering questions today, that if you do have questions or ideas or input that you want to give, that you'll share that with us through the question section of your screen here, through GoToWebinar, or through email to us. We're happy to take that as well. And we can use that as we move into the spring and kick off the evaluation portion of this project. So we're going to be looking at doing an evaluation of the program review process. And that evaluation is actually going to have a couple different components to it. So we're going to look at the process itself. So our friends here at ICCB did a great job of explaining the process and the manual and the way that it works given the sequence and the schedule of it and the different questions and kind of how that process works. We're going to dive into how that process works at your college campus. So who's involved? How do you get information from them? How does the data that's pulled and used in this process gathered? Who has that information? How is this put together in a report and shared back with the Community College Board? But we also want to understand how that data is used or how this process is used to help support programs at the college. So not just how do you go through the process and is it effective and is it efficient, but who benefits from the process and how is that data used to improve programs at your college. So since there has been a fairly significant change in how program review is being done throughout the state, we're going to use this as an opportunity to look at what was done and what was completed and handed in and shared with the Illinois Community College Board on September 1st of this year, to help provide some formative feedback to the Illinois Community College Board to use with its process moving forward. So hopefully with your help and your feedback, we can make this process even more streamlined, more effective, more efficient, and ensure that it benefits the students that we serve. So the process evaluation part of this, we're really going to key in on a couple general questions. We want to understand how the program evaluation process in Illinois can be improved. So you'll be able to tell us what problems or questions or issues that you had. And then we also want to know what kind of supports are needed. What we recognize is that community colleges throughout the state, because we've been working with community colleges in the state for 27 years now. So we recognize that there is just an abundance of variety, and everybody has different types of programs, different students that they're serving, different structures at their institutions, different ways that leadership works and how, whether it's fairly centralized or distributed. We know that there are different resources for each institution. So trying to give one process that works across the entire state is a fair challenge. And so what we're going to look at is what kind of support structures could be out there that reach people where they are and what they need. Because every institution is going to need something a little different. We're going to hopefully find maybe a little suite of ways that we could create support structures to make this an effective and efficient process for you. For the outcome evaluation, we want to understand to what extent is this process actually being used in decision making? How is the information that you learn through this process informing the decisions that are made on a day-to-day and on a bigger scale about the programs that you have at your institution? Are these data being used to change services, to update courses, to change the composition of a program? And who is effectively being served by that? So are these changes reaching the most vulnerable populations? Are they supporting more effective workplaces? What are they doing? And so since I know that it is, or we know that this is something that the Community College Board wants to see as being an effective part of your planning and decision process, we want to understand, well, is it? And to what extent is it? And where is it most effective? And what kind of tweaks would be necessary to make that more effective? So a lot of you may be familiar with Pathways to Results, and I wanted to give you a little bit of history of why is OCCRL doing this work? Why is this something that we're interested in and that ICCB would trust us to do? And one of the things that ICCB has supported us throughout the last, I believe, 10 years in developing is this equity-driven, data-driven process for improving programs, pathways, and really a lot of institutions have institutionalized it as just a general improvement process. This process has always been linked to program review, often quite informally. So a lot of the teams that we have supported at colleges across the state have looked at issues that they identified through their program review process. Some of them have been issues they know will come up in their program review process, so they take a proactive look at these and try to improve their program before it's reviewed. Sometimes it's part of the program review process itself. And most recently, over the last few years, we've seen institutions trying to integrate these two processes, the program review and Pathways to Results, so that they be more seamless and related to each other at an institutional level. And we've really had the pleasure of learning a lot from these institutions who are doing this work. One of the key tenets to Pathways to Results is the use of disaggregated data to understand who is being served by programs and to ensure that changes affect a move towards equity, that serve the most vulnerable parts of the population and that reach students who otherwise might be underserved or whose needs might be overlooked. And that process has helped us understand how data is gathered and used by different colleges across the state. And that reference I made earlier to the variety of colleges, a lot of our understanding of that has come through this process. And we're hoping to be able to use what we've learned through that in combination to what you share with us so that we can ensure this process is equity driven and that it is useful at the college level. Because one of the things I can confidently relate is how institutions gather their data and disaggregate it and evaluate it is really different depending on that institutional's culture, size, programs, and we've worked thankfully with some amazing colleges throughout the state to start to understand what some of the key issues and barriers are in those areas. So hopefully we can continue to build in that direction. I want to let you know that we are a research office. We are located at the University of Illinois. And one of the things that we've been doing over the last few months is making sure that we are fluent and understand some of the key concepts in literature in this area. What I've put up here on the screen shows you a selection of the kind of key areas that we have been looking at. We've looked at a variety of capital theories. These look at social, cultural, political, physical, and human capital. These are all different areas that we use to influence change and to move towards a change based system. And so we have been looking at those theories. We have been looking at, I believe, actually, Whitney mentioned earlier, data-driven decision-making. We've looked at that, and in combination with evidence-driven decision-making, two very similar concepts that are kind of approach the same idea of how do we use data in decision-making from slightly different perspectives. We've gone back and looked at some of the traditional organizational change and system theories and research that's out there. But some of the stuff that I would say is probably newer that maybe people wouldn't be as familiar with that we've been tapping in and looking at is transformational and theories of change that are centered on this idea of equity and substantial change versus incremental changes, so transformational change, and evidence of cultures of evidence and cultures of change. We are starting to understand as a body of researchers that there's a lot more to whether evidence gets used than the quality of the evidence and how it is gained and how it's analyzed. There's a whole culture around that work, and we want to be able to support and recognize that when we're working with the colleges this year. So the goals of the evaluation are really quite straightforward. We have 4 of them. This is the one and only slide I will read right out to you. So our first goal is to improve the efficiency and efficacy of program review process by identifying challenges, redundancies, omissions, and providing recommendations for refining the process. So we really want to make sure that that process is as streamlined and as effective as it can be. Our second goal is to examine the variation of program review processes across institutional contexts and institutional identities to understand how the process is utilized across diverse institutions throughout Illinois. And so when I say diverse institutions, we'll look at things like urbanicity, so how urban or rural. We'll look at the size, the focus on CTE, the types of programs offered, the students served or the demographics of the students served, the size of the programs offered. We really want to look across these different areas and understand how institutional context is reflected in this. And of course, we have different consortia of colleges and structures for our colleges that we'll also look as well. For our third evaluation goal, we're going to try to identify professional development, technical support, and supplemental materials that could improve outcomes associated with program review. And our last goal is to improve the application of program review findings in college campus level programmatic decision or planning and decision making. That's a lot of words. So here's how we're going to try to do it. And this is a real nutshell idea of what our study will look like. We're going to be kicking off the data analysis work in January. We're going to be looking at all of the program reviews that were submitted on September 1st, 2017, as well as cross-referencing some of those materials with things that are publicly available on websites. And we're also going to look at them in terms of some of the how they meet and how they reflect what we know of the program review manual and the supplemental materials provided by ICCB. We are going to be looking at doing interviews or starting to conduct interviews through late January through probably the end of April. And those will be targeted private phone interviews that we'll conduct with different individuals across the state. And we're going to use our interviews to really try to ensure that we get a lot of different voices represented in this work. So we'll be looking at people with different types of jobs and roles in program review and at different institutions throughout the state, to ensure we get good coverage of the experiences and the voices and the perspectives. And then the last thing, which is kind of the pivotal, exciting thing to share, is we're going to conduct 3 events, one in February, one in April, and one in June, where we will work with key individuals from across the state, and Whitney's going to share a little bit more about who those key individuals are. But what we're going to be looking at there is both an opportunity to share and discuss and kind of talk about what it would be in an ideal world with program review, and to share information with you about the program review process. But we're also going to ask this team of experts, I'm going to have about 45 people from across the state, to help us understand how that process works and how it could work better. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about those 3 events. In the first event in February, we're going to focus in on that program review process. We're going to want to understand how it works, and we're going to make sure that we embed time in there for this group of individuals to share with each other their own best practices, the types of ways that they approach the additions or changes or integration that they've done at their campus level with their programs, and let this be an opportunity for you to learn from each other and for us to learn from you. The second one, we're going to really focus on how program review is used as an improvement process. And so we're going to talk about plans for improvement and how this is used in decision making. We're going to look at how analyzing disaggregated data informs you about your student populations and the changes you would make in regards to that. And for our last event, we're going to be doing that one in June. And this is going to be really that team's ability to reflect back and talk about what they could see as the future for program review. What advice would they have for ICCB? How could this process, what kind of tools, what kind of supports would make this process more effective and promote change in a positive way for colleges across the state? When we have our findings, and we want to be able to share them. We have a little theory here at OCCRL that research that's done without dissemination is done in a box and it's pointless. So we have already projected that we will have a webinar in August of 2018 where we will share everything that we have learned through this process back with you. Our findings, our recommendations, anything that we think could be helpful or useful, so clarifications, and probably also what next steps there may be and how we can continue to support either formally or informally the work that's being done throughout the state on program review. I also anticipate we'll have other ways that we will share information as we learn. I would encourage you to recognize and visit our project website, but I know most of the time people, they think they're going to do that, but it's hard to remember to do that on a regular basis. But we do send out blogs and newsletters. So if you're on our OCCRL listserv, which I hope you all are, you'll be able to get the information about this project through our newsletters as it comes through. And one thing I wanted to point out is that today's webinar, as well as any other webinars we would have associated with this project, we will post to our project website. And so our project website is on the screen. It's occrl.illinois.edu/PRI, which stands for Program Review Illinois. So while we don't anticipate being able to answer your questions today during this webinar, I did wanted to stop again and acknowledge that, yes, there are questions coming in, and thank the people who are sharing their questions. Ask you to to think about those and start thinking about any last questions you want to send that way, and encourage you that if you have questions that happen or come up after the webinar, to reach out to me or to Whitney and share those. We are definitely looking for your input and your ideas. And as Whitney mentioned earlier, these questions will be used to continue to feed the frequently asked questions that ICCB is putting together and sharing with you. And so I want to encourage you to put your questions out there as they come up, and to share them with me or with Whitney as you're comfortable. And I just wanted to acknowledge that this is a project that is part of the work that OCCRL is doing, and show you my beautiful colleagues here. And I also want to acknowledge the other members of the team. So if you get emails or somebody reaches out from our team, you're not surprised. We have 3 research assistants who are contributing to this work: Frederick Douglas Dixon, Shantae Thrill, and Angel Velez. And of course, all the work at OCCRL is under the direction of our director, Ebony M. Zamani Gallagher, who gives us so much joy every day by helping us stay on track and make sense of all the amazing information that we receive from you and on all of our other projects. So I want to encourage you anytime that if you want to reach out to us, we're here for you. And I am going to hand this back to Whitney, who has a few more things to share with you. So it should be back to you now, Whitney.
Thank you, Heather. Heather, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
I can.
We want to avoid any technical issues. So thanks, Heather, again for sharing what you'll be doing over the next year or so in terms of program review. I think it also reiterates our focus and prioritization of program review for the system. So again, they will be making recommendations to us, and those recommendations will inform revisions of the manual template in the process. We do not anticipate that those changes will be a major overhaul by any means, but we may be tweaking some questions and be taking out some questions and be adding some questions. And then likely we will be providing some resources and guides and offering technical assistance in the future. So something that she mentioned toward the end was the focus group. And so we want to offer this opportunity, sort of call for participation. So we're looking for participants from colleges to participate in these 3 focus group meetings, which will be in-person meetings, likely centrally located, in February, April, and June. Colleges selected will receive travel reimbursement for these meetings. We are seeking out colleges with expertise in program review processes, not those that want to learn or who are new to the process. College staff that we would like to participate in this process would include an institutional research staff member, an administrator, dean, or faculty member responsible for the sort of coordination and completion of the program review process, CPE dean and faculty or faculty, and then student services or other support staff. So we're looking for, from colleges that will be selected, 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 colleagues to attend these program review focus groups. So if you are interested in participating, we would like you to send a letter detailing your interest, level of expertise, dedication to this project, because we want, if we select you, we want you to be able to make all 3 meetings and be engaged in the process, and then a list of your group members. You can submit this to the email address shown by January 5th, and we will make notifications pretty quickly after that. Again, the focus groups that we select will represent the diversity of our community college system, so we're going to look for diverse groups in terms of size, geography, program. And we understand that the lessons learned and revisions and improvements from this process won't really come into play for a year or 2 in terms of the review cycle, but we want to do this right. We want to do our due diligence in improving this process. And so I wish we would have thought about this a couple years ago before we revamped the manual, but unfortunately it doesn't work like that. So again, if you are interested or have questions about these focus groups, please reach out to me and I can help answer those. We look forward to, we'll be selecting around 15 colleges to participate in this focus group.
And Whitney, let me just add briefly a couple details. So a reminder that the events will be February, April, and June next year. The dates and the location for those events we are working on nailing down right now, and I anticipate that we will have those before the end of the calendar year, so probably before everyone heads out for the holidays. So just in case you're wondering, like, how would I know if I can make it to these groups? We're hoping to have that information up. We can post it on our site and we can share it with everyone who was on this webinar today. But we are working on that. I anticipate it'll be either in Champaign or in Bloomington, and it'll be in February, April, and June. And the specific dates we should have and location we should have within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Heather. All right, and as always, if you have questions, you can email the CP inbox, and we will disseminate those to relevant staff. And then you can also remember to type your questions in the chat or question box, and we'll incorporate those into the FAQ. Or if they're too specific, we will reach out to you directly. And so, thank you again for joining the webinar today. I have linked the program review webpage at the bottom where you can access the manual, the templates, the FAQ, and other information. And thank you and happy holidays.